When my son Stanley slid those mortgage documents across my garage workbench and said with ice in his voice, "Dad, you've got enough saved up. Time to help family." I felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my boy's face. My refusal sent his wife Beverly into a social media rage, and they hit me with a lawsuit that made my blood run cold. They thought they were dealing with some confused old man who'd roll over and pay up. But this 59-year-old retired Navy veteran and plumber wasn't about to let anyone steal what I'd earned through 20 years of military service and 35 years of honest work. You won't believe how this whole mess played out. I'm Gerald Parker, and at 59 I thought I'd seen everything during my 2 decades as a Navy construction electrician and 3 decades fixing pipes around Dallas. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal that was coming from my own flesh and blood. The Craftsman socket wrench slipped from my hand and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage when Stanley walked in that Tuesday morning carrying a manila folder thick as a phone book. I'd been rebuilding the transmission on Mrs. Sullivan's old Buick. She couldn't afford shop rates, and I'd always believed in helping neighbors when I could. Stanley barely glanced at the car or asked how I was doing, just marched straight to my workbench like a man on a mission. "Dad, we need to talk." His voice had that flat, businesslike tone I'd been hearing more and more since he married Beverly 2 years ago. I wiped the grease off my hands with a shop rag and looked at my son. 32 years old, wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than I used to spend on clothes in a month. When did he start dressing like he worked on Wall Street instead of tech support? "What's on your mind, Stanley?" He opened that folder and spread out papers across my workbench, right next to my Snap-on torque wrench set. Mortgage application, purchase agreement, financial disclosures. The numbers jumped out at me like a slap across the face. $400,000 for a townhouse in Plano. "Dad, you've got enough saved up," Stanley said, not even meeting my eyes. "Time to help family." I stared at those papers, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The monthly payment would be $3,200. Stanley made decent money as an IT support specialist, around $65,000 a year. But Beverly worked part-time at some boutique and spent most of her time on Instagram pretending to be an influencer. Together they might clear $75,000 if they were lucky. "Stanley, this payment is more than half your take-home pay. That's why we need you to co-sign." He finally looked at me, and something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't my son asking for help. This was someone making a demand. I heard heels clicking on the driveway before Beverly appeared in the garage doorway. She had her phone out, of course, probably filming another one of her Instagram stories. Everything was content for Beverly. "Gerald." She rushed over and gave me one of those fake hugs that lasted exactly long enough for her to get the right camera angle. "Isn't this exciting? Our dream home?" She thrust her phone in my face, showing pictures of granite countertops, a master suite bigger than my entire bedroom, and a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, Beverly continued, her voice getting higher with excitement. "Perfect for when we start our family." I looked at Stanley. "You two are starting a family?" Beverly waved her hand dismissively. "Eventually, once we get settled in our new place." I picked up the mortgage application and studied it more carefully. Their combined debt payments were already eating up 40% of their income. Credit cards, car loans, student loans. Stanley's BMW lease alone was $950 a month. "You're asking me to guarantee a loan you can't afford to pay." Stanley's jaw tightened. "Dad, don't make this complicated. You've got money sitting in retirement accounts that you'll never spend. We're your family. This is what families do for each other. What families do is work hard and live within their means." Beverly's smile faltered. "Gerald, we've looked at cheaper places, but they're all in terrible neighborhoods. We can't raise children somewhere like that. You're not raising children anywhere right now." "Well, we will be." Beverly's voice got sharp. "And when that happens, do you want your grandchildren growing up in some rundown apartment?" I set the papers down and looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become this person? The boy I'd raised would have been embarrassed to ask his father to risk his retirement for a house he couldn't afford. That boy understood the value of earning what you wanted through hard work. "Stanley, you make good money. There are plenty of nice homes you can afford without my help. But not like this one." Beverly held up her phone again, scrolling through photos. "Look at this master bathroom. It's got a rainfall shower and a soaking tub, and a payment that'll bankrupt you." Beverly's eyes flashed. You know what, Gerald? I'm getting really tired of your negative attitude. Stanley deserves nice things. We both do. We work hard. I almost laughed at that. Beverly's idea of hard work was posting selfies and complaining about how tough millennials had it. But I kept my mouth shut. No point starting a fight in my own garage. The answer is no. Those 4 words hung in the air like smoke from a bad weld. Stanley stared at me like I'd just told him the earth was flat. No? Just like that? Just like that. Beverly stepped between us, her phone now pointed at me like a weapon. Are you seriously going to choose money over your son's happiness? I'm choosing financial sense over financial suicide. This is unbelievable. Beverly started pacing around my garage, still filming. Stanley, your father is literally stealing our future. I'm not stealing anything. I'm protecting my retirement from a bad decision. Stanley gathered up the papers with shaking hands. Dad, you're making a mistake. A big one. The mistake would be signing those papers. Beverly stopped pacing and turned to face me directly. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something ugly underneath all that fake sweetness. Fine. Have it your way, Gerald. But don't expect us to keep pretending we want a relationship with someone who obviously doesn't care about our happiness. They left without saying goodbye. Beverly was already talking into her phone as they walked away, probably starting her social media campaign before they even reached the car. I stood in my garage surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the scattered tools of honest work, watching my son drive away in a BMW he couldn't afford, married to a woman who saw dollar signs instead of family bonds. The boy who used to help me fix neighbors' leaky faucets for free was gone, replaced by someone who thought I owed him a lifestyle he hadn't earned. I picked up my wrench and got back to work on Mrs. Sullivan's transmission. At least some problems could still be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. My phone started buzzing before I'd even finished cleaning up for the day. Stanley's name flashed on the screen, but when I answered, it was Beverly's voice that came through, sharp and demanding. Gerald, we need to talk. Right now. I thought we were done talking. Well, we're not. Stanley is devastated. Absolutely devastated. Do you have any idea what you've done? I could hear Stanley in the background, his voice high and strained. Tell him about the deposit, Bev. Tell him we'll lose everything. We put down $20,000 as earnest money, Beverly continued. If we don't get financing approved by Friday, we lose it all. $20,000, Gerald. Gone. I sat down on my workbench stool. Where did you get $20,000? Silence. Then Stanley's voice, closer to the phone now. We borrowed it. From who? That's not important. What's important is that you're going to cost us everything because you're being selfish. Selfish. The word stung more than it should have. I'd spent 35 years working 60-hour weeks, saving every dollar I could, living in the same modest house while watching neighbors upgrade to bigger places they couldn't afford. I'd put Stanley through college without him taking on debt, helped him with his first car, his first apartment deposit, even paid for half his wedding when he and Beverly couldn't manage it alone. Stanley, if you borrowed $20,000 for a deposit on a house you can't afford, that's not my problem. That's your poor planning. Poor planning? Beverly's voice came back, shrill with indignation. We planned perfectly. We just expected our family to act like family. Family doesn't mean financial suicide. The call ended with Beverly hanging up on me. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with text messages. Stanley. Dad, please reconsider. This house means everything to us. Beverly. Gerald, I said things I didn't mean. I was just emotional. Can we start over? Stanley again. I'm literally crying right now. You're breaking your son's heart. Then Beverly. Fine, be that way. But don't come crying to us when you're old and alone with all that money you're hoarding. I screenshot each message and saved them to a folder on my phone. Something about this whole situation felt orchestrated, like they'd planned this whole emotional assault. Beverly's sudden switches between sweet and vicious, Stanley's convenient breakdown. It all felt too rehearsed. My landline rang around 9 p.m. My sister Carol's voice came through, careful and concerned. Gerald, I just got off the phone with Stanley. He says you refused to help them buy a house? Here it came, the family pressure campaign. Carol, did he mention it was a $400,000 house with payments they can't afford? He said it was their dream home and that you could easily help but chose not to. I explained the real situation, their debt, their income, the ridiculous payment that would bankrupt them within months. Carol listened without interrupting, but I could hear the shift in her tone as the facts sank in. Gerald, that does sound pretty risky. It's not risky, Carol. It's financial suicide. After we hung up, I poured myself a beer and sat on my back porch looking out at the yard I'd been working on for 15 years. Modest house, paid off, surrounded by neighbors who'd been here just as long. Real community, built on mutual respect and shared values, not Instagram followers and lease payments. My phone buzzed with notifications from Facebook. Beverly had tagged me in a post. Heartbroken tonight. When family chooses money over love, it shows you who people really are. Some parents forget that their children's dreams matter too. Feeling disappointed and hurt. #family. Broken heart. Values. The comments were already pouring in. People I'd known for years expressing sympathy for the young couple struggling with an unsupportive father-in-law. Beverly's friends adding their own stories about selfish boomers who didn't understand how hard things were for young people today. I didn't have Facebook, but my neighbor Judith Sullivan showed me the post on her phone the next morning when we ran into each other at the mailbox. Gerald, I'm confused about this whole situation. I looked at Beverly's post, all wounded innocence and carefully crafted victimhood. No mention of the $400,000 price tag or their existing debt. No context about their spending habits or inability to make the payments. Judith, they want me to co-sign for a house that costs more than they make in 5 years. Her eyebrows went up. That's a lot different than what this post makes it sound like. Beverly's good at telling the story she wants people to hear. By noon, Beverly's social media campaign had spread beyond Facebook. My phone was buzzing with screenshots from people showing me her Instagram stories and TikTok videos. She'd filmed herself crying in her car, talking about toxic family members and the broken promises of older generations. Stanley appeared in some of the videos, looking genuinely distraught as Beverly narrated their financial struggles. My father-in-law has more money than he could spend in 2 lifetimes, but he won't help us buy our first home, she said to her phone camera, tears streaming down her face. This is what's wrong with the boomer generation. They got theirs, and now they want to pull the ladder up behind them. The videos were getting thousands of views. Comments from people I'd never heard of, calling me a heartless old man who didn't understand how impossible the housing market was for young people. Beverly had turned their financial irresponsibility into a generational morality tale, with her and Stanley as the victims of an unfair economic system and cruel family dynamics. But she made a critical error. Her own social media history was still public. I spent that afternoon going through months of Beverly's Instagram posts, taking screenshots of everything. The vacation to Cancun 3 months ago, first-class flights and a resort that cost more per night than most people's mortgage payments. Stanley's birthday dinner at the most expensive steakhouse in Dallas, complete with a $200 bottle of wine and photos of Wagyu beef. Beverly's shopping hauls, showing off designer purses and shoes that cost more than some people's rent. 2 weeks ago, she'd posted about their struggling young couple lifestyle, but her stories from the same week showed her getting a $300 facial, buying a new Michael Kors bag, and celebrating Stanley's promotion with champagne that cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a month. The timeline was damning. While publicly claiming poverty and financial stress, they were living like millionaires on borrowed money. I saved everything to my growing evidence folder. If they wanted to play public opinion games, they'd picked the wrong opponent. 20 years in the Navy and 35 years of solving problems had taught me that the best way to fix a leak was to shut off the source and document everything. Thursday morning brought a certified letter that made my blood run cold. Coleman, Walsh & Associates, attorneys at law. The return address looked expensive, the kind of law firm that specialized in separating families from their money. I signed for the envelope and read it twice, my anger building with each word. They wanted me to come to their office for a family financial mediation session to resolve this matter before formal legal proceedings become necessary. I called my old Navy buddy Arthur Rodriguez, who'd become a lawyer after his service. Tank had been my roommate on the base, and I trusted him more than anyone else I knew. Gerald, sounds like they're planning to sue you. What exactly did you promise them? Nothing. I never promised them anything. Then what's their legal theory? I thought about all those family dinners where I'd talked about helping each other, the times I'd mentioned wanting Stanley to be happy and successful, the conversations about family sticking together through tough times. Had they been recording those moments, building a case that I'd made some kind of commitment? Tank, they might try to twist conversations about family support into financial promises. In Texas, oral contracts are legally enforceable if they can prove the terms and consideration. But Gerald, family support conversations usually don't meet that standard unless there were specific dollar amounts and timeline discussions. I scheduled an appointment with Tank for Friday morning. Meanwhile, I kept documenting everything. Every social media post, every text message, every conversation with family members who'd been contacted by Stanley and Beverly. The pattern was becoming clear. They weren't just pressuring me. They were building public sympathy and potential witness testimony for a lawsuit they'd probably been planning all along. My phone rang Thursday night. Stanley's name on the screen, but his voice was different when I answered. Shaky, desperate. "Dad, can we meet somewhere? Just you and me? What about Beverly? She doesn't know I'm calling. Please, Dad, just an hour." We arranged to meet Friday afternoon at Riverside Park, the same place I'd taught him to ride a bike 25 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I got to the park early and sat on the same bench where I used to push Stanley on the swings. He showed up 10 minutes late, looking older than his 32 years. The expensive clothes couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the way his hands shook when he gestured. "Dad, this whole thing has gotten out of hand." I waited. Let him talk. The lawsuit, the social media stuff, all this drama, maybe we can work something out just between us. What kind of workout? If we drop everything, maybe you could help us with something smaller? Not the whole house, but maybe a down payment. 20, 30,000? The negotiation was pathetic. Start with an impossible demand, get rejected, then come back with something that seemed reasonable by comparison. Beverly had probably coached him on this approach. "Stanley, where is your wife?" His face tightened. "She said I was showing weakness by meeting with you, that we should stick to our plan." "What plan?" "Dad." He looked around the empty park, then back at me. "I'm drowning. Our credit cards are maxed out at $52,000. The car payment is killing us. Beverly's spending is completely out of control, but I can't seem to stop her." I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Tell me about your financial situation, son. Are you recording me?" "For my protection." Stanley stared at the phone, then seemed to deflate completely. "We owe $52,000 on credit cards. The BMW lease is $950 a month, not the $600 I told you. Beverly spends $3,000 a month on clothes, restaurants, and her stupid Instagram content. The admissions poured out like water from a burst pipe. They'd been living on credit for 2 years, constantly borrowing from the future to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Beverly's influencer career generated maybe $200 a month, but she spent 10 times that on the clothes and experiences she used for content. "Dad, we never thought you'd fight back." Beverly said most older people just settle rather than deal with the stress and embarrassment of a lawsuit. "Your wife was wrong. When the discovery process starts, they'll want all our financial records, our social media accounts, everything." Stanley buried his face in his hands. "When people see what we actually spend versus what we claimed, we're going to be completely exposed." I turned off the recording and put my phone away. "Stanley, what do you want from me?" "I want to take it all back. The lawsuit, the social media posts, all of it. Can we just forget this ever happened?" I stood up from the bench, looking down at my son. "No, Stanley, we can't." "But Dad, you accused me in legal documents of breaking promises I never made. You tried to destroy my reputation in the community. You attempted to steal my retirement savings through legal fraud." His face crumpled. I was desperate. So was I, Stanley. Desperate to understand how I raised a son who could do this to his own father. I walked away, leaving him on the bench where I'd once taught him the value of honesty and hard work, lessons he'd apparently forgotten. The lawsuit papers arrived Monday morning via certified mail. Stanley Parker and Beverly Parker versus Gerald Parker. Amount demanded: $400,000 plus attorney fees and costs. The allegations made my stomach turn. Breach of oral contract, promissory estoppel, intentional infliction of emotional distress. But the worst part was near the end. They were claiming I suffered from age-related cognitive decline that made me forget promises I'd made to family members. I drove straight to Tank's office and spread the papers across his conference table. "This is aggressive," Tank said, scanning the documents. "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Can they win?" "Gerald, they'd have to prove you made specific promises with clear terms. Did you ever say anything like, 'I'll co-sign for your house,' or 'I'll give you money for a down payment'?" I thought carefully through every conversation. I said things like, "Family helps family, and I want you to be happy." But I meant emotional support, not financial guarantees. That's not enough for a contract. But they'll try to bring in witnesses who heard these conversations, family members who might testify that you seemed committed to helping them financially. Tank pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to document everything. Their spending patterns, their social media posts showing luxury lifestyle while claiming poverty, their history of financial manipulation. Then we're going to countersue for defamation, harassment, and abuse of process. How much will this cost? A lot. But Gerald, if we win, they'll have to pay your attorney fees. And from what you've shown me, they can't afford their own legal bills, much less yours." We spent 3 hours planning our defense strategy. Tank would subpoena their complete financial records, social media accounts, and correspondence with everyone they'd borrowed money from. We'd prove a pattern of financial irresponsibility and manipulation that showed their lawsuit was just another scam. The discovery process was brutal for Stanley and Beverly. Tank's requests were comprehensive and legally bulletproof. Every credit card statement, every social media post, every text message about their financial situation. Under oath, they had to admit to spending patterns that completely contradicted their public claims of poverty. Beverly's Instagram account became a goldmine of evidence. While posting about their financial struggles, she'd simultaneously been documenting expensive dinners, shopping sprees, and luxury experiences. The timeline showed she'd spent $4,000 on a weekend shopping trip to New York the same week Stanley posted on Facebook about being unable to afford groceries. Tank also discovered they'd borrowed money from at least 6 different people over the past year, always with sob stories about temporary setbacks and promises to pay it back. None of it had been repaid. The pattern of financial manipulation was clear and extensive. "Gerald, look at this," Tank said, spreading out bank statements across his desk. They borrowed $3,000 from Stanley's college roommate in March, claiming they needed help with medical bills. But that same week, Beverly charged $2,800 at Nordstrom and posted Instagram stories from a spa weekend in Austin. I studied the evidence, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. This wasn't just financial irresponsibility, it was systematic fraud against everyone who cared about them. How many people have they scammed? At least 8 that we can document. Stanley's former boss lent them $2,500 last December. Beverly's sister gave them $1,500 for emergency car repairs that turned into vacation spending. Your brother Wayne sent them $800 after Beverly called crying about not being able to afford Stanley's birthday present. Each revelation made the picture clearer. Stanley and Beverly weren't just targeting me. They were working everyone in their social circle, always with carefully crafted sob stories and promises of repayment that never materialized. Meanwhile, the community response to their lawsuit was fascinating to watch. The veterans at VFW Post 1837 had rallied around me completely. Word had spread through the veteran network about a young couple trying to sue a 20-year Navy veteran for refusing to co-sign a mortgage he couldn't afford. "Brother, we've got your 6 on this one," said Eugene Walsh, the Post commander. "What they're doing to you is what they're doing to veterans across the country. Adult children who see our service benefits and retirement savings as their inheritance instead of our earned security." The VFW organized a legal defense fund, not that I needed the money, but as a show of solidarity. Local businesses owned by veterans started displaying signs. "We support our veterans against elder financial abuse." Carl Murphy at the hardware store put up a poster with my picture and the caption, "Gerald Parker, defending our community values." Beverly tried to fight back on social media, but her credibility was shot. People started fact-checking her posts in real time, pointing out the contradictions between her poverty claims and luxury lifestyle documentation. Comment sections turned brutal. "Weren't you just posting about that expensive dinner at the French Room last week? Girl, your purse costs more than my car payment. Stop playing victim. Maybe try getting a real job instead of scamming family members." 3 weeks before the trial, Beverly's social media presence suddenly disappeared. All her Instagram stories about our family conflict vanished, probably because her lawyer realized they'd become evidence of her manipulative behavior. But Tank had already archived everything. Roger Coleman, their attorney, tried to negotiate a settlement. He called Tank with increasingly desperate offers. My clients are willing to drop the lawsuit if Mr. Parker agrees not to pursue his countersuit. No deal, Tank replied. They started this war. They can face the consequences. What if they agree to pay $5,000 in damages? Roger, your clients are going to pay a lot more than $5,000 when we're done with them. The trial was set for a Thursday morning in downtown Dallas. I put on my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Stanley's college graduation, and met Tank at the courthouse. Stanley and Beverly were already there with Coleman, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who specialized in these family financial disputes. As we walked into the courthouse, I noticed about 20 veterans from VFW Post 1837 filing in behind us. They'd come to show support wearing their VFW caps and service pins. Eugene Walsh nodded at me as he took a seat in the gallery. Thought you might like some backup, brother. Judge Susan Mitchell called the courtroom to order with crisp efficiency. She was known for having little patience with frivolous lawsuits, which gave me hope. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, noting the veteran presence, before settling on the paperwork in front of her. Coleman stood to present their case. His voice was smooth and practiced, designed to evoke sympathy for his young clients who'd been betrayed by broken family promises. Your Honor, my clients have documented evidence of repeated verbal commitments from the defendant to assist with major family purchases. Mr. Stanley Parker will testify that his father explicitly promised to help with their first home purchase, creating reasonable expectations of support. I watched Stanley take the stand, looking nervous and unprepared under Coleman's questioning. Stanley took the stand looking nervous and unprepared. Under Coleman's questioning, he recounted conversations that had never happened the way he described them. According to his testimony, I'd made specific promises at family dinners and holiday gatherings to guarantee their mortgage. My father told us at Christmas dinner that he wanted to make sure we got our dream home, Stanley said, his voice shaking. He said family takes care of family, and that he had more than enough saved for his retirement. It was complete fiction, and I watched Judge Mitchell's expression grow skeptical as Stanley stumbled through obviously rehearsed answers. Tank was taking notes, preparing to tear apart every fabricated detail during cross-examination. And what did you understand your father to mean by these statements? Coleman prompted. That he would help us financially when we found the right house. That he wouldn't let us struggle when he had the means to help. Did you rely on these promises when you began house hunting? Yes, sir. We looked at properties based on what we thought we could afford with Dad's help. Tank stood for cross-examination, and his approach was methodical and devastating. Mr. Parker, you testified that your father promised to help you buy a house. Did he ever specify a dollar amount? Stanley hesitated. Not exactly, but yes or no, Mr. Parker? Did your father ever specify a dollar amount? No. Did he ever say the words, I will co-sign your mortgage? Not those exact words, but yes or no, Mr. Parker? No. Did you record any of these alleged promises? No. Did you ask your father to put his commitment in writing? We didn't think we needed to. He's family. Tank pulled out a stack of documents. Mr. Parker, are these your credit card statements for the past 12 months? Stanley's face went pale. Yes. According to these statements, you and your wife charged $47,000 in luxury purchases while claiming financial hardship. Can you explain that discrepancy? Coleman objected, but Judge Mitchell allowed the question. Stanley stammered through weak explanations about necessary expenses and special circumstances, but the numbers spoke for themselves. Beverly's testimony was even worse. She took the stand wearing a modest dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, tears already forming in her eyes before Coleman asked his first question. Mrs. Parker, can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant? Gerald has always been difficult, Beverly said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He's very controlling with money. He would make these grand statements about helping family, but then when we actually needed help, he turned his back on us. What kind of statements? He would say things like, money doesn't matter when it comes to family, and I want you kids to be happy and successful. He encouraged us to look at nice houses, said he wanted his future grandchildren to have the best. I felt sick listening to her twist every casual conversation into a binding financial commitment. Beverly was good at this. taking kernels of truth and wrapping them in layers of manipulation until the lie seemed believable. Tank's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Parker, you've testified about financial hardship. Are these your Instagram posts from the past 6 months?" Tank displayed blown-up screenshots on an easel. Beverly's own social media posts showed expensive dinners, designer shopping sprees, and luxury vacations, all time-stamped during the period she claimed they were struggling financially. This post from March shows you at a spa in Austin. The caption reads, "Treating myself because I deserve it." The receipts show you spent $800 that weekend. Was this during your financial hardship? Beverly's composure cracked. "Sometimes you have to invest in self-care. This post from April shows a shopping haul from Nordstrom. You're wearing a dress with the price tag visible, $450. Was this during your financial hardship? I needed professional clothes for work." "Mrs. Parker, according to your employment records, you work part-time at a boutique making $12 an hour. How does a $450 dress qualify as a work necessity?" The questions kept coming, each one exposing another layer of Beverly's deception. Tank had organized the evidence chronologically, showing how their spending increased even as their public claims of poverty became more dramatic. Then came the recorded conversation. "Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording made by the defendant during a conversation with his son." Coleman objected vigorously, but the recording was legal under Texas one-party consent laws. Judge Mitchell allowed it, and Stanley's voice filled the courtroom. "Dad, we never thought you'd fight back. Beverly said most older people just settle rather than deal with the stress and embarrassment of a lawsuit." The courtroom was dead silent as the recording continued, Stanley admitting to their manipulative strategy, their real debt situation, and Beverly's out-of-control spending. When it finished, Judge Mitchell looked at Coleman with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Counselor, do you have any explanation for your client's recorded admission that this lawsuit was based on a strategy to intimidate an elderly person into settling?" Coleman was sweating now. "Your Honor, my client was under emotional distress when he made those statements." "Mr. Parker," Judge Mitchell addressed Stanley directly, "did you or did you not tell your father that you expected him to settle this lawsuit rather than fight it?" Stanley looked at Coleman, then at Beverly, then at the floor. "Yes, Your Honor. I said that." The veteran gallery murmured their disapproval. Eugene Walsh shook his head in disgust. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about honor, integrity, and respect for those who'd served their country. Tank stood for his closing argument, his voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. "Your Honor, what we've witnessed today is not a family dispute about financial support. What we've witnessed is a calculated attempt to defraud a United States Navy veteran who served his country with honor for 20 years and then worked honestly for another 35 years to build his retirement security." He gestured towards Stanley and Beverly. "These defendants have systematically lied about their financial situation, manipulated family members and friends into giving them money under false pretenses, and then attempted to use this court system to steal $400,000 from a man who earned every penny through service and hard work. The evidence spoke for itself. Their spending patterns, their recorded admissions, their history of manipulating others, it all painted a clear picture of two people who saw other people's money as their personal entitlement fund." Judge Mitchell took a 15-minute recess to review the evidence, and when she returned, her expression left no doubt about her decision. The courtroom fell silent as she prepared to deliver her verdict. "I've reviewed all evidence presented in this case," Judge Mitchell began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This court finds the plaintiff's claims to be not only without merit, but actively fraudulent." Stanley went white. Beverly gripped the table so hard her knuckles showed through her skin. The veteran gallery sat perfectly still, watching justice unfold. The evidence demonstrates a clear pattern of financial manipulation, deliberate misrepresentation, and attempted fraud. The plaintiffs have provided no credible evidence of any promise, written or verbal, to provide $400,000 for a home purchase. Judge Mitchell's voice grew sharper as she continued. "Furthermore, the evidence shows the plaintiffs maintained expensive lifestyles while claiming poverty, borrowed money from multiple sources under false pretenses, and systematically attempted to manipulate an elderly family member for financial gain. I sat perfectly still, feeling a deep satisfaction as justice unfolded exactly as it should. 20 years of military service had taught me that truth and integrity always win in the end, even when the battle gets ugly. The plaintiff's lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. The defendant's countersuit for defamation, harassment, and abuse of process is granted in full. Coleman tried to interrupt. Your Honor, if we could— I'm not finished, Counselor. Judge Mitchell's tone could have cut steel. The court awards the defendant full reimbursement of legal fees in the amount of $33,400, plus court costs and punitive damages of $18,000 for the emotional distress caused by this frivolous action. Stanley made a choking sound. $51,400 they didn't have, on top of their own legal bills that probably exceeded $25,000. Their total legal disaster was approaching $80,000, money they'd never be able to pay. Additionally, this court is referring this case to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential perjury charges. Lying under oath is a felony, and this court does not tolerate fraud. Beverly burst into real tears this time, not the manufactured emotion she'd displayed earlier. The reality of criminal charges was finally sinking in. Stanley sat motionless, staring straight ahead like a man watching his entire future collapse in real time. Finally, the court issues a restraining order prohibiting the plaintiffs from contacting the defendant directly or through third parties, from approaching his residence, and from making any further public statements about this matter. Judge Mitchell looked directly at Stanley and Beverly, her expression containing nothing but contempt. You attempted to use this court system to defraud a United States Navy veteran who served his country with honor. You have disgraced yourselves, wasted taxpayer resources, and committed perjury in my courtroom. The gavel came down with finality that echoed through the silent courtroom. Court is adjourned. The veteran gallery erupted in quiet applause, mindful of courtroom decorum but unable to contain their satisfaction at seeing justice served. Eugene Walsh approached me as I stood, his weathered face beaming with pride. Brother, that was beautiful. Watching those two get what they deserved. That's what we call a righteous victory. Tank gathered his papers with obvious satisfaction. Gerald, in 25 years of practicing law, I've never seen a more complete vindication. They didn't just lose, they got destroyed. In the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters had gathered. Word of the dramatic case had spread through the local veteran community and beyond. A crew from Channel 8 News waited with cameras rolling. Mr. Parker, how do you feel about the verdict? Asked Jennifer Martinez from the Dallas Morning News. I thought carefully before answering, aware that this moment would define how the story was remembered. I feel that justice was served today. Family relationships should be built on love and respect, not financial manipulation. I hope this sends a message that our veterans and senior citizens won't be intimidated by threats or lawsuits from people who want something for nothing. What would you say to other families facing similar situations? Document everything. Stand up for yourself. And remember that saying no to family members who want to exploit you isn't cruelty. It's necessary boundary setting that protects everyone involved. Carl Murphy from the hardware store pushed through the crowd, tears in his eyes. Gerald, the whole veteran community is proud of you. You stood up for all of us who've been targeted by family members who see us as ATM machines instead of human beings. Beverly appeared suddenly beside me, her face desperate and streaked with mascara. Gerald, please, can we talk? I know I made mistakes, but— Ma'am, Eugene Walsh stepped between us, his voice carrying military authority. You heard the judge? There's a restraining order. I suggest you respect it. Stanley tried to approach from the other side, but 3 more veterans from VFW Post 1837 quietly positioned themselves as a barrier. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. This decorated Navy veteran was under their protection. Tank guided me toward the exit, past the cameras and well-wishers. Gerald, we need to discuss enforcement of the judgment. They'll probably try to declare bankruptcy to avoid paying. Can they do that? They can try, but court-ordered punitive damages aren't always dischargeable in bankruptcy, and the criminal charges will follow them regardless of their financial situation. Outside the courthouse, the Texas sun felt warmer than it had in months. My pickup truck sat in the parking lot like an old friend, reliable, unpretentious, paid for. Everything Stanley and Beverly's BMW wasn't. The drive home through familiar Dallas streets felt like emerging from a nightmare into peaceful reality. My modest neighborhood had never looked better, my workshop had never felt more welcoming. I sat in my driveway for several minutes, just appreciating the simple satisfaction of being home and vindicated. Mrs. Sullivan waved from her porch, where she'd been waiting for news. "Gerald, how did it go?" "Justice served, ma'am. Complete victory." Her smile could have powered the entire block. I never doubted it for a second. Honest people always win in the end. Over the following weeks, the consequences for Stanley and Beverly became clear and devastating. Their townhouse deal had collapsed within hours of the court judgment, not just because they lost financing, but because their real estate agent refused to work with them after learning about the lawsuit. Word spreads fast in the Dallas real estate community, and nobody wanted to deal with clients who'd tried to defraud a Navy veteran. Stanley lost his IT job 3 days after the trial. His employer, a mid-sized tech company that prided itself on integrity and community values, didn't appreciate the negative publicity from the perjury investigation. The background check revealed his legal troubles, and companies in Dallas weren't eager to hire someone with pending criminal charges. Beverly's remaining social media following abandoned her completely once the court records became public. Her Instagram account, which had once boasted 3,000 followers, dropped to fewer than 200, mostly spam accounts and hate followers who enjoyed watching her downfall. Her dreams of influencer stardom died with her credibility. The financial destruction was total. The BMW was repossessed within a week. They'd missed 3 payments while spending money on legal fees. Their luxury apartment lease was broken, with penalties that added another $4,000 to their debt load. With no income and mounting legal bills, they were forced to declare bankruptcy, though Tank assured me the court-ordered damages might not be dischargeable. Through my brother Wayne, I learned they'd moved in with Beverly's parents in Oklahoma, completely humiliated and financially destroyed. Beverly's father, a retired oil worker, had reportedly given them a harsh lecture about responsibility and consequences that left Beverly in tears for days. "They're living in her parents' basement," Wayne told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "Beverly's mother makes her do chores like she's 12 years old. Stanley's looking for work, but nobody will hire him with those criminal charges pending." Did I feel guilty about their consequences? Not for a moment. Every misfortune that befell them was the direct result of choices they'd made. They'd gambled everything on intimidating a veteran they saw as an easy target and lost spectacularly. The veteran community response was overwhelming and deeply meaningful. VFW Post 1837 made my case a centerpiece of their Elder Financial Abuse Awareness campaign. Eugene Walsh organized speaking engagements at veteran events across Texas, where I shared my story as a warning to other older veterans who might face similar manipulation. Brothers and sisters, I told an audience of 200 veterans at the state VFW convention in Houston. We swore an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Sometimes those domestic enemies wear familiar faces and share our last names. But our duty to protect what we've earned through service doesn't end just because the threat comes from family. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of veterans approached me with their own stories of family financial manipulation. Some had been successfully pressured into bad financial decisions. Others had stood firm like I did, but felt isolated and guilty about refusing family demands. "You've given us permission to say no," said Harold Thompson, a 68-year-old Vietnam veteran from Austin. "My daughter's been pressuring me to co-sign for a house she can't afford. After hearing your story, I know I'm doing the right thing by refusing." The speaking circuit became surprisingly rewarding. American Legion posts, VFW halls, and senior centers across Texas invited me to share my experience. Each presentation reached 50 to 200 people, many of whom were facing similar pressure from adult children who viewed their parents' savings as future inheritance rather than earned security. My story was featured in VFW Magazine, American Legion Magazine, and several regional veteran publications. The articles generated hundreds of letters from veterans and their families, sharing similar experiences and thanking me for speaking out about a problem many had suffered in silence. The legal aftermath continued to unfold in satisfying ways. The district attorney's office pursued perjury charges against both Stanley and Beverly. While they ultimately received probation rather than jail time, the felony convictions meant permanent criminal records that would follow them for life. Every job application, every apartment rental, every loan application would require them to disclose their convictions for fraud and perjury. Roger Coleman, their attorney, faced professional consequences as well. The Texas State Bar launched an investigation into his handling of the case, particularly his failure to properly vet his client's claims before filing obviously frivolous lawsuits. While he wasn't disbarred, the public reprimand and required ethics training sent a message to other attorneys who might consider similar tactics. 6 months after the trial, I received an unexpected call from Tank with news that brought deep satisfaction. "Gerald, I just got off the phone with the DA's office. Stanley tried to contact you through a third party. Apparently he wanted to apologize and see if you'd help with their legal fees." "Through who?" "Your cousin Janet. The DA considers it a violation of the restraining order even though it was indirect contact. They're adding a contempt charge to his record." I shook my head in amazement. Even facing criminal charges and financial ruin, Stanley couldn't resist one more attempt at manipulation. Some people never learn. My daily routine returned to the peaceful rhythm I'd known before this nightmare began. Morning coffee on the back porch, afternoons in the workshop fixing things that could be fixed, evenings reading or visiting with neighbors who'd supported me throughout the ordeal. The community that had briefly questioned my character now held me up as an example of principled resistance to financial abuse. Mrs. Sullivan's transmission was running perfectly. Carl Murphy still refused to let me pay for hardware, insisting my victory was payment enough. The local coffee shop where I met Wayne every Wednesday had put up a small plaque, "Gerald Parker, Community Hero 2024. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Navy Veterans Association awarded me their Community Service Medal for outstanding advocacy on behalf of elder veterans facing financial abuse. The ceremony was small, held at VFW Post 1837, but the honor meant more to me than any civilian recognition could have. Standing at that podium, looking out at fellow veterans who understood the values of service and sacrifice, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my Navy days: the deep satisfaction of a mission completed with honor. The broader lessons of the experience settled into my consciousness like sediment after a storm. Truth really does triumph over manipulation, but only if you're willing to fight for it with documentation, patience, and principle. Dignity and integrity are worth defending even when the cost seems high, especially when family members mistake your love for weakness. Most importantly, I'd learned that saying no to family members who want to exploit you isn't cruelty. It's necessary boundary setting that protects everyone involved. By refusing to enable Stanley and Beverly's financial irresponsibility, I'd actually done them a favor, though it would take them years to understand that lesson. A year after the trial, I was working in my garden when Patricia Walsh, my attorney Tank's partner, called with unexpected news about Stanley and Beverly's situation. "Gerald, I thought you'd want to know. Stanley finally found steady work. He's doing tech support for a small company in Tulsa. Apparently, he's been sober for 6 months and attending financial counseling sessions. Beverly's working full-time at a department store and taking community college classes." I continued planting tomato seedlings as she spoke. The earth was rich and dark, perfect for growing healthy things while removing harmful weeds. Are they still together? Barely. Word is they're in marriage counseling, trying to figure out if their relationship can survive without the financial fantasy lifestyle that held it together. Beverly's parents are making them pay rent and contribute to household expenses, basically teaching them adult responsibility for the first time. After hanging up, I sat back on my heels, surveying the neat rows of plants that would feed me through the summer and into fall. The garden was a perfect metaphor for life. Nurture what's healthy, remove what's harmful, and trust that good things will grow from patient effort. Stanley had been like a weed in my garden, choking out peace and draining resources meant for healthy growth. Removing him had been painful but necessary. Now maybe he was finally learning to grow properly in Oklahoma soil under the strict supervision of people who wouldn't enable his worst impulses. My phone rang with another call, this one from Eugene Walsh at VFW Post 1837. "Gerald, I've got good news and interesting news. Which do you want first?" "Let's start with good news. The American Legion is giving you their Distinguished Service Award at the National Convention. They want you to speak to 5,000 veterans about elder financial abuse prevention." The honor was overwhelming. To be recognized at the national level for something that had started as a personal family crisis felt surreal. And the interesting news? Channel 8 wants to do a documentary about your case. They're calling it Fighting Back, a veteran's stand against family financial abuse. They want to interview you, Tank, some of the other victims Stanley and Beverly scammed, and maybe even get comment from them if they're willing. The documentary idea intrigued me. If my story could help even one veteran avoid being manipulated by greedy family members, the exposure would be worthwhile. 3 months later, the Channel 8 documentary aired on primetime, reaching an audience of over 200,000 viewers across Texas. The response was immediate and powerful. The station received hundreds of calls from veterans and their families sharing similar stories and asking for resources to protect themselves from financial manipulation. The documentary included interviews with 3 other veterans who'd been successfully manipulated by adult children into bad financial decisions. Their stories were heartbreaking. Men and women who'd served their country with honor, only to be betrayed by family members who saw their service benefits and retirement savings as entitlement programs. "I gave my son $50,000 for his business," said retired Air Force Master Sergeant William Davis. "He promised to pay it back with interest. That was 3 years ago. Now he won't even return my phone calls." The documentary also featured brief comments from Stanley and Beverly, filmed outside their apartment in Tulsa. Stanley looked older, humbled by his experience. Beverly appeared uncomfortable and defensive, clearly still not fully accepting responsibility for their actions. "We made mistakes," Stanley told the camera. "Big mistakes. But we never meant to hurt my father. Never meant to hurt him." Tank's response during his interview was withering. They sued him for $400,000, tried to destroy his reputation, and attempted to steal his retirement savings. If that's not intentionally hurtful, I don't know what is. The documentary's impact extended beyond Texas. Veterans organizations across the country began using it as educational material for workshops on financial security and family boundary setting. The Veterans Administration incorporated lessons from my case into their elder care advocacy training programs. Perhaps most satisfying was a letter I received from the Texas State Bar Association, informing me that my case had been added to their ethics curriculum as an example of frivolous litigation and the professional responsibilities attorneys have to properly vet their clients' claims. "Your experience," wrote State Bar President Margaret Rodriguez, "will be taught to future lawyers as a cautionary tale about the importance of legal ethics and the consequences of participating in fraudulent lawsuits." My workshop became a pilgrimage site of sorts for veterans facing family financial pressure. Tank referred clients to me regularly. Older veterans who needed encouragement to stand firm against adult children demanding money for houses, cars, businesses, or lifestyle expenses they couldn't afford. "The hardest part," explained 62-year-old Marine veteran Carlos Mendoza during one of our coffee shop conversations, "is feeling like a bad father for refusing to enable my daughter's poor decisions." "You're not a bad father for teaching responsibility," I told him. "You're a good father who understands that true love sometimes requires tough choices." These conversations became my new mission. What had started as a defensive battle to protect my own retirement had evolved into an offensive campaign to help other veterans recognize and resist financial manipulation before it destroyed their security and family relationships. The peace I'd found wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of purpose. Every veteran I helped stand firm against family financial pressure was a small victory for the values we'd sworn to defend: integrity, honor, and the principle that respect must be earned, not demanded. 2 years after the trial, on a crisp October morning, I was adjusting the carburetor on my neighbor's riding mower when an unfamiliar car pulled into my driveway. A young man got out, maybe 30 years old, wearing work clothes and carrying himself with the straight-backed posture I recognized from my own military days. "Mr. Parker, I'm Staff Sergeant Kevin Martinez, Army Reserve. I drove down from Fort Worth because I needed to meet you in person." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "What can I do for you, Sergeant?" "Sir, my parents saw your documentary. My mom's been pressuring me to co-sign for her mortgage refinance so she can take out equity for my sister's wedding. $50,000 for one day. After watching your story, I realized I was about to make the same mistake your son did, just from the other direction." We sat on my back porch with coffee, and Kevin told me his story. His mother had been living beyond her means for years, using home equity loans to fund elaborate family celebrations and expensive gifts. Now she wanted Kevin to guarantee another loan that would put her house at risk. "The hardest part," Kevin said, "was realizing that saying no didn't make me a bad son. It made me a responsible adult who understood that enabling poor financial decisions isn't love, it's enabling destruction. Kevin's visit reminded me why I'd become an accidental advocate for financial responsibility. Every veteran who learned to say no to family financial manipulation was a victory for the values we'd sworn to defend. That afternoon, I received a certified letter that made me pause. The return address was from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Stanley's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten on plain notebook paper. Dad, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I had to write this letter even if you throw it away without reading it. I've been in counseling for 18 months now, and I'm finally starting to understand what I did to you. You weren't being selfish or cruel. You were trying to teach me responsibility that I'd never learned. Beverly and I nearly destroyed ourselves chasing a lifestyle we couldn't afford, and when reality hit, we tried to make it your problem instead of facing our own failures. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that your son, the real Stanley, not the stranger who tried to steal your retirement, is finally growing up. I'm working steady now. Beverly and I are separated, but trying to rebuild our relationship on honest foundations instead of financial fantasies. We're paying our debts slowly but consistently. Most importantly, we're learning to live within our means. I saw the documentary. I'm proud that my father's story is helping other veterans. You turned our betrayal into something meaningful that protects people who serve their country. That's the father I remember from my childhood, someone who always tried to fix problems and help people. I hope someday, when I've proven I've really changed, we might be able to talk again. Until then, I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. Your son, Stanley. I read the letter 3 times, feeling emotions I hadn't experienced since the day this whole mess began. Not forgiveness exactly, but something softer than the anger I'd carried. Maybe Stanley was finally becoming the man I'd tried to raise. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer, not because I was ready to reconcile, but because it represented something important, proof that consequences, properly applied, could actually teach the lessons they were meant to teach. Evening found me in my workshop, the same place where this story had begun with Stanley's outrageous demands. Now it was peaceful again, filled with the honest work of maintaining and repairing things that could be fixed. Mrs. Sullivan's mower would run like new tomorrow. Carl Murphy's truck needed a transmission flush next week. Simple problems with clear solutions. My phone rang. Eugene Walsh from VFW Post 1837. Gerald, I've got news that'll make your day. Remember Harold Thompson, that Vietnam vet from Austin who said your story helped him refuse to co-sign for his daughter's house? Of course. Well, his daughter just called to thank him. Turns out she couldn't afford the house anyway, and forcing herself to buy something within her actual budget saved her from foreclosure when interest rates went up. She said refusing to enable her poor decision was the best thing her father ever did for her. After hanging up, I sat in my workshop surrounded by tools that had served me faithfully for decades. Craftsman wrenches that still turned bolts smoothly. Snap-on socket sets that fit perfectly after thousands of uses. Simple, honest tools for simple, honest work. The boy who used to help me in this garage was gone, probably forever. But maybe, just maybe, he was becoming a man who could understand the difference between help and enabling, between love and financial manipulation. My life had found its rhythm again, but with added purpose. Morning coffee and newspaper. Afternoons helping neighbors with mechanical problems they couldn't afford to pay shops to fix. Evenings answering calls from veterans across the country who needed encouragement to stand firm against family financial pressure. The garden was producing its fall harvest. Tomatoes, peppers, squash that I'd share with neighbors who'd supported me through the darkest days of family betrayal. Good things grown from patient effort and careful tending. Justice served, family protected, honor intact. Most importantly, other veterans armed with the knowledge that they didn't have to surrender their financial security to prove their love for ungrateful family members. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought with the people closest to you. But sometimes those battles are exactly what's needed to protect everything that matters. Your integrity, your security, and your right to live with dignity after a lifetime of service and honest work. The workshop was calling. Mrs. Sullivan's neighbor had a chainsaw that wouldn't start, and I'd promised to take a look. Some problems can still be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. That's a lesson I plan to keep teaching until the day I die.